During dinner, my sister said she was pregnant and that the father is my husband. But then I revealed a secret that destroyed them. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. It was supposed to be the best night of my life. I had just spent 4 years grinding, working 12-hour days, missing holidays, and eating takeout at my desk, all to finally land the position of commercial director at a top tech firm in Austin. I was on top of the world. I couldn't stop smiling. The first thing I did was call the two people I loved most in this world, my husband, Keith, and my younger sister, Brenda. I told them to meet me at the Capitol Grill. It was that kind of place, dim lighting, mahogany walls, and steaks that cost more than a weekly grocery bill. But I didn't care about the price. I could afford it now. I had worked hard for this. I arrived first. I was wearing this stunning navy blue dress that Keith always said made my eyes pop. I chose a private booth in the back because I wanted us to celebrate without holding back. I ordered a $200 bottle of Cabernet and sat there, just soaking it in. The dining room was buzzing with the low hum of executives and wealthy couples, an environment I finally felt I belonged in. When I saw them walk in, something felt off immediately. You know that gut feeling you get when the vibe just shifts? Brenda was glowing. She had this radiance about her that I hadn't seen in years. She was wearing a dress that was a little too tight, hugging her figure. Keith, on the other hand, looked like he was walking to the gallows. He was fidgeting with his tie, sweating slightly even though the air conditioning was blasting. He always got a little uncomfortable in expensive places, but this was different. There was a tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Congratulations on the promotion, Val. Brenda squealed, hugging me with a suspicious amount of enthusiasm. She was never really the affectionate type, especially with me. We sat down, and the waiter poured the wine. I started rambling about the new projects I would lead, the 40% salary increase, the stock options. I was so excited to share this new life with them. Brenda was listening, but her eyes kept darting to Keith. Keith was staring at his napkin like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Actually, Brenda interrupted right in the middle of me talking about the company retreat in Bali. We have news to share, too. My stomach did a weird flip. I paused, holding my wine glass midair. Brenda reached across the table. But she didn't reach for the bread basket. She reached for Keith's hand. And Keith, my husband of 4 years, let her take it. He intertwined his fingers with hers. I'm pregnant, Brenda said. Her voice was steady, almost proud. The world stopped. Literally stopped. The clinking of silverware, the jazz music, the chatter, it all faded into a distant buzz. The lights seemed to flicker. I stared at my sister's hand holding my husband's hand as if it were a hallucination. Pregnant? I whispered. My brain was trying to process the geometry of the situation. Brenda was single. Or so I thought. It's complicated, Val, Keith spoke for the first time. His voice was cracked and dry. But, it happened. And we fell in love. They looked at me. It wasn't with guilt. It was with a mixture of expectation and poorly disguised satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for me to explode. To scream. To flip the table and make a scene that would give the other diners something to talk about for months. Brenda squeezed Keith's hand tighter, and he looked at her with this pathetic puppy dog look of relief, as if confessing made everything okay. How long? I managed to ask. My voice sounded strange, calm, like I was underwater. 3 months, Brenda replied, rubbing her hand over her still flat stomach. It started right after your birthday. My birthday was in December. It was March. 3 months. 3 months of betrayal. 3 months of lies. 3 months of them laughing at me behind my back while I worked 60 hours a week to build a future for us. For Keith and me. Valerie, say something? Keith asked, looking nervous now. Look, I know it's a shock. But love is love, right? And the baby needs both parents together. Congratulations, Brenda laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Look, Val, I know it's not easy, but these things happen. We didn't plan it. But we're a family. We can work this out. I looked at them. Really looked at them. My sister, whose college tuition I paid for when our parents couldn't. My husband, whose car payments I covered every month. They were sitting there, united against me, on the night of my biggest professional triumph. I felt a fire ignite in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was a cold, hard realization. They didn't just want to be together. They wanted to humiliate me. They chose tonight specifically to ruin my moment. They wanted to see the successful, strong Valerie crumble. I slowly picked up my purse. I pulled out 2 $50 bills, more than enough to cover my glass of wine and the bread I hadn't touched, and placed them on the immaculate white tablecloth. I'm going home, I said, standing up. My legs felt like jelly, but I locked my knees. You two do whatever you want. Valerie, wait! Keith called out, half rising from his chair. I didn't turn around. I walked toward the exit, head held high, navigating through the tables of happy diners. But as I reached the door, I paused. I looked back at their reflection in the large brass mirror near the hostess stand. They were still sitting there. Brenda was smiling. She looked relieved. They thought they had won. They thought the hard part was over. They had no idea. Before I move on to what happened next, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. If you are listening to this and you're already feeling the heat, please do me a huge favor. Like this video and comment the number 1 down below. It tells me you're with me, that you support me, and that you're ready to hear how I turned this nightmare into their worst reality. Comment 1 now, and let's continue. I walked out of the Capitol Grill with the posture of a queen, but the moment the valet handed me the keys to my car, the facade cracked. I didn't drive home. I couldn't go there yet. That apartment was full of us. Pictures of our wedding, his favorite mug, the throw blanket we bought together. I couldn't face it. Instead, I drove 3 miles down the road to a super Walmart parking lot. It was brightly lit, impersonal, and vast. I parked in the furthest corner, away from the late-night shoppers. I turned off the engine, and the silence of the car rushed in to meet me. Then, I screamed. It wasn't a movie scream. It was a guttural, animalistic sound that tore at my throat. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel until my palms burned. I cried so hard that I couldn't breathe, gasping for air like I was drowning on dry land. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in the back, it was a complete evisceration of my reality. Keith. My Keith. The man who rubbed my feet after a long day. The man who I thought was my partner. And Brenda. My little sister. The girl I taught to braid hair. The girl I defended from bullies in middle school. As I sat there, wiping snot and mascara from my face with a fast food napkin I found in the glove box, memories started flooding back. Not the happy ones. The other ones. The ones I had buried deep down because I wanted to believe we were a perfect family. I remembered being 10 years old. Brenda was 7. We were in the living room of our parents' house in San Antonio. I had just come home with straight A's on my report card, beaming with pride. My mother barely looked up from the TV. "That's nice, Valerie," she had said. But 10 minutes later, Brenda came in crying because she scraped her knee. My parents rushed to her, cooing, giving her ice cream, treating her like she was a wounded soldier. I stood there, holding my report card, invisible. It was always like that. Brenda was the baby. The fragile one. The one who needed protection. I was Valerie. The strong one. The independent one. The one who didn't need anything. "You're the older sister," my dad would say whenever Brenda broke one of my toys or stole my clothes. "You have to be the bigger person. Share with your sister." So I shared. I shared my toys. I shared my allowance. When I got a full scholarship to study business at the University of Texas, Brenda made a snide comment at dinner, "Must be nice to be the smart one. Some of us actually have to struggle." She made my achievement about her insecurity. And my parents? They told me not to brag so I wouldn't hurt Brenda's feelings. I helped pay for her college tuition when our parents' retirement fund got tight. I bought her a used car when she crashed hers. I was always the safety net. And how did she repay me? By sleeping with my husband. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were swollen, red, and puffy. My expensive makeup was ruined. I looked pathetic. No, I whispered to the empty car. No. I wasn't going to be the victim here. I had spent my entire life being the bigger person, the responsible one, the doormat. Tonight, that ended. They thought I was just going to cry and fade away. They thought I was going to hand over my husband and my life to them because Brenda is pregnant and Brenda needs help. I put the car in reverse. The tears had stopped. A cold numbness took over, spreading from my chest to my fingertips. It felt better than the pain. It felt like armor. I drove home. The drive was blurry, but my mind was sharpening. I started connecting dots I had been too blind to see before. The late nights Keith spent at work. The weekends Brenda came to visit Austin but stayed in a hotel instead of my guest room. "I just need some space, Val," she had said. Space to sleep with my husband, apparently. They had played me for a fool. But the thing about playing a game with someone who built their career on strategy and negotiation is that you better make sure you kill them with the first shot. Because if they get back up, you're in trouble. I pulled into the parking garage of my apartment complex. My spot was next to where Keith usually parked his truck. His spot was empty. Of course. He was probably with her. Celebrating. Toasting to their new life. Toasting to the baby. I took a deep breath, fixed my hair in the mirror, and stepped out of the car. I wasn't Valerie the doormat anymore. I was Valerie the commercial director. And I was about to handle this like a hostile takeover. Walking into the elevator, I leaned my head against the cool metal wall and closed my eyes. The numbness was holding, but beneath it, my brain was replaying the last 5 years like a movie reel on fast forward. I was looking for the signs. And God, were there signs? I met Keith 5 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming, funny, and had that rugged, uncomplicated vibe that I found refreshing after dating intense corporate types. He worked as a car salesman at a mid-range dealership. He didn't make a lot of money, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 a month with commissions, but I didn't care. I was already making double that, and soon, triple. I fell in love with his simplicity. Or what I thought was simplicity. Now, I realized it wasn't simplicity. It was lack of ambition. And worse, it was opportunism. I remembered a specific date night about 6 months into our relationship. We were at a nice sushi place. When the check came, Keith patted his pockets, looking panicked. "Oh man, Val, I left my wallet in my other jacket." I smiled, pulled out my card, and said, "Don't worry about it, babe." He looked so relieved. Too relieved. That happened again a month later. And again. Soon, it just became the norm. I paid for the dinners. I paid for the vacations. I paid for the upgrades on the house. Keith contributed, sure. He paid for groceries sometimes. He covered the internet bill. But whenever a big expense came up, a new roof, a car repair, a trip to Cabo, he would look at me with those puppy dog eyes and say, "Babe, sales were slow this month. Can you cover it? I'll pay you back." He never did. And Brenda. Oh, Brenda. My sister was a whole different kind of parasite. She had always been obsessed with my things. When we were teenagers, she would steal my clothes. As adults, it escalated. Every time she came to visit me in Austin, she would wander around my apartment, touching everything, asking about prices. "How much is this rent?" she asked once, running her hand over my granite countertops. "I own it, Brenda." "The mortgage is about $2,000, I replied. Her eyes went wide. $2,000? That's, like, 3 times my rent. Must be nice to be rich. It wasn't rich. It was hard work. I worked 60-hour weeks while Brenda floated from one freelance graphic design gig to another, complaining that bosses didn't understand her creative vision. She wanted the lifestyle without the labor. I remembered last Christmas vividly now. We were at my parents' house. I had just bought myself a new designer handbag, a reward for closing a massive contract. Brenda had stared at that bag all night. When we were in the kitchen cleaning up, she had snapped. "Do you realize how frustrating it is, Val?" she had hissed, a little tipsy on eggnog. "You have the perfect apartment, the new car, the trips, the expensive clothes. And here I am, barely making rent. It's not fair." "I work hard, Brenda," I had said gently. "You can have this too." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You just got lucky. You have the golden child luck. I have to scrap for every crumb." At the time, I thought it was just the alcohol talking. I felt bad for her. I even slipped a $500 gift card into her stocking the next morning to help her out. I was so stupid. It wasn't frustration. It was envy. Pure, toxic envy. And Keith? He was the bridge. He was the weak link she could exploit. I realized now how often they would talk when I was busy working. "Keith understands me," Brenda would say. "He knows what it's like to be the underdog." They bonded over their mediocrity. They bonded over their resentment of me. I was the cash cow, the ATM, the person who made them feel small just by existing. So they decided to take me down a peg. What better way to steal my power than to steal my husband? The elevator dinged at my floor. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the concrete floor. I felt a wave of nausea. I had let a fox into the henhouse. Actually, I had married the fox and invited the other fox over for dinner. I thought about the money. I did a quick mental calculation. Over 4 years of marriage, I had probably spent over $100,000 on things that benefited Keith directly. His truck payments. His wardrobe. His investments in bad stock tips. And now, with Brenda pregnant, they probably saw me as the ultimate solution. Divorce settlement. Alimony. Child support. They viewed me as a resource to be harvested. I reached my door and put the key in the lock. My hand was trembling again. I took a deep breath. "Get it together, Valerie." I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment was dark. But even in the darkness, I could tell something was wrong. The silhouette of the room felt different. Emptier. I flipped the light switch. And that's when the second wave of shock hit me. The living room looked like it had been raided. Not by burglars, but by someone who knew exactly what they wanted. The 65-inch OLED TV I had bought for the Super Bowl last year? Gone. The PlayStation 5? Gone. The expensive leather recliner that Keith called his throne? Gone. I walked through the apartment, my heels sinking into the plush rug, feeling like a ghost in my own home. He had moved out. He hadn't just left, he had executed a planned extraction. While I was at work today, smiling and thinking about my promotion, Keith had been here with boxes and packing tape. I went into the bedroom. His side of the closet was stripped bare. His shoes were gone. But he left the trash. Old receipts, empty shoeboxes, and a pile of wire hangers were scattered on the floor. It was a final middle finger to me. I'm taking what's valuable, you can clean up the mess. I walked into the bathroom. His toothbrush was gone. But his wet towel was still on the floor, dampening the bath mat. It was so typically Keith. Even in leaving me for my sister, he couldn't be bothered to pick up after himself. I sat down on the edge of the king-sized bed, the bed we had shared for 4 years, the bed where we had whispered about growing old together. I stared at the empty space on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. He had taken the frame but left the nail. My chest started to tighten. A panic attack. I knew the signs. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My breath was coming in short, shallow gasps. I slid off the bed and sat on the floor, pressing my back against the wall, trying to ground myself on the cold tile. Breathe, Valery. Breathe. I couldn't believe the level of coordination this took. They had planned this. They knew exactly when I would be at the office. They knew I would invite them to dinner to celebrate. They used my promotion as the cover for their coming-out party. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The sound was deafening in the silent apartment. I crawled over and grabbed it. The screen lit up with a message. Sender, Keith. Time, 2:14 a.m. I stared at the name. It felt alien now. I swiped open the message. I'm at B's place. Didn't want to make things awkward at the apartment tonight. We need to talk tomorrow. There are assets to discuss. Be reasonable, Val. Don't make this a war. I read it 3 times. B's place. He was calling her B. A nickname. Intimate. And then the audacity, assets to discuss. Be reasonable. He was already talking about assets. He was sleeping with my pregnant sister, in her bed, probably laughing about how they pulled one over on me, and he had the nerve to tell me to be reasonable? Assets, I whispered the word. It tasted like bile. He meant the money. He meant this apartment. He meant my retirement accounts, my stocks, the value of the startup shares I had acquired. He saw the dollar signs. He thought because we were married in Texas, a community property state, that he was entitled to half of everything I had built. I threw the phone across the bed. I wrapped my arms around my knees and rocked back and forth. The panic was slowly being replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They thought I was just a hurt wife. They thought I was an emotional wreck who would sign checks just to make the pain go away. They thought they could guilt-trip me into funding their new little family because family helps family. I looked around the room. I had bought this apartment before we got married. I paid the mortgage. I paid the HOA fees. I paid for the renovation of the kitchen. Keith had contributed peanuts. Suddenly, a thought struck me. A memory. It was fuzzy, buried under 4 years of happy marital delusion. Paperwork. Before the wedding. There was paperwork. I stood up, my legs shaky but functional. I walked out of the bedroom and into the second bedroom, which I used as my home office. This was my sanctuary. Keith rarely came in here, he found my organization intimidating. I turned on the desk lamp. Rows of color-coded binders lined the shelves. I was obsessive about documentation. Tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies. I scanned the spines. 2019, 2020. 2021. Where was the marriage file? I pulled down a green binder labeled Personal Legal. My hands were shaking as I flipped through it. Birth certificate. Social Security card. Passport copies. Then, I saw it. A thick envelope at the back. It was sealed. The logo on the corner was from a law firm, Williams & Associates. I stared at the envelope. My heart rate picked up again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was adrenaline. I hadn't opened this since the week before our wedding. I remembered the day clearly now. But before I could open it, my phone rang. It wasn't a text this time. It was a call. I looked at the screen. Mom. It was 7 a.m. on a Friday. My mother never called this early unless someone died. Or unless someone had already spun the narrative. I stared at the ringing phone. I knew exactly what this conversation was going to be. And I knew it was going to break whatever piece of my heart was still intact. I picked up the phone. Hello? Valerie? My mother's voice was frantic, breathless. Oh, thank God. I've been calling Keith, but he won't answer. Brenda just called me. She told me everything. I sat down in my office chair, clutching the sealed envelope in one hand and the phone in the other. She told you she's pregnant with my husband's child? I asked, my voice flat. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. She told me she's pregnant, yes, my mother said, her tone shifting from panic to a strange, pleading softness. And that Keith is the father. Valerie, honey, are you okay? Am I okay? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Mom, my husband left me for my sister. They announced it at dinner on the night of my promotion. No, I am not okay. I know, she rushed to say. It's terrible. It's a mess. Your father is pacing around the kitchen, he doesn't know what to say. But Val, you have to listen to me. I'm listening. Brenda is, well, she's fragile. You know how she is. She's crying her eyes out right now. She says they didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. They fell in love. They fell in love, I repeated. Mom, do you hear yourself? She slept with my husband. I know. And it's wrong. It's very wrong. But. She took a deep breath. There is a baby involved, Valerie. An innocent baby. Your niece or nephew. We have to think about the baby. I closed my eyes. There it was. The pivot. The guilt trip. What are you saying, Mom? I'm saying, don't do anything rash, she said. Don't make this a war. Keith is, well, he's going to be the father of your sister's child. He's still family, in a way. You're the strong one, Val. You've always been the strong one. You have your career, you have money, you have that beautiful apartment. Brenda has nothing. And now she has a baby coming. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. So I should just accept it? Is that what you want? You want me to bless them? Maybe write them a check so they can set up the nursery? No! Of course not. My mother sounded defensive now. But, well, Brenda mentioned you were talking about lawyers. Val, lawsuits are expensive. And ugly. Keith says he just wants what's fair so he can support the child. Can't you just settle this quietly? Help them get started? For the family's sake? Help them get started. The room spun. My own mother was asking me to finance my replacement. She was asking me to subsidize the betrayal because Brenda was fragile and I was strong. Because I had money and Brenda didn't. In my parents' eyes, my success was a penalty. It meant I could absorb pain because I could afford therapy and nice wine. Brenda needed protection because she was a mess. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. You're asking me to give money to the man who cheated on me and the sister who stole him. I'm asking you to be compassionate, she snapped. This is hard for everyone, Valery. Not just you. Do you think I want this? But the baby is coming. We can't let them starve. Keith doesn't have a job right now. He told me he quit the dealership to look for something better in San Antonio. They need help. He quit his job? I asked. That was news. Yes. So he's stressed. Please, Val. Just talk to him. Divide the assets fairly. Don't leave your sister on the street. I looked at the envelope in my hand. Williams and Associates. You're right, Mom, I said coldly. I shouldn't leave this up to emotion. I should handle this like a business transaction. Exactly. She sounded relieved. I knew you'd understand. You're always so sensible. I'll handle it, Mom. Goodbye. Wait, Val. I hung up. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's number. I couldn't listen to it anymore. If they wanted to choose sides, they had chosen. They chose the grandkid. They chose the fragile one. I was alone. Truly alone. The realization was terrifying, but also liberating. If I was alone, I didn't owe anyone anything. I didn't have to be the bigger person. I didn't have to share my toys. I looked at the sealed envelope again. I ripped it open. I pulled out the document. It was thick, bound with a blue backing. Prenuptial agreement. Between Valery Saunders and Keith Miller. Date, May 12, 2019. My hands trembled as I turned the first page. I vaguely remembered the day we signed this. I had insisted on it because I had just bought the apartment and my career was taking off. Keith had made a joke of it. He had called it rich people nonsense. He barely read it. He just wanted to get to the bachelor party. I started reading. And as I read, a smile, a cold, dangerous smile, spread across my face. The silence in the apartment was broken by the sound of a key turning in the lock. It was Saturday morning, barely 24 hours after the dinner from hell. I was sitting on the sofa, drinking black coffee. I hadn't showered. I hadn't slept. But I was dressed in a sharp blazer and jeans. I was ready. Keith walked in. He stopped when he saw me. He looked terrible, eyes bloodshot, stubble on his chin, wearing the same clothes from the restaurant. Good. Val, he said, closing the door behind him. He didn't look remorseful. He looked annoyed. I came to get the rest of my clothes. And my golf clubs. Take them, I said, not looking up from my iPad. He hesitated. He was expecting screaming. He was expecting crying. My calm was throwing him off. He walked past me into the bedroom. I heard him banging around, zipping up a suitcase. 10 minutes later, he dragged 2 large bags into the living room. He stood there, shifting his weight. Look, about the text, he started. You're at Brenda's, I said. I know. Yeah. Well. It's not ideal, living in that tiny apartment of hers. Especially with the baby coming. He paused, waiting for me to react to the baby card. I didn't flinch. So, he continued, puffing out his chest a bit. We need to talk about the divorce settlement. I talked to a buddy of mine who knows about this stuff. Texas is a community property state. Everything acquired during the marriage is 50/50ths. He said it with such confidence. Such arrogance. And? I took a sip of coffee. And, well, this apartment. We lived here for 4 years. It's the marital home. It's appreciated a lot in value. Zillow says it's worth $600,000 now. You bought it for $350,000. I bought it before the marriage, Keith. Yeah, but we paid the mortgage with marital funds, he argued, parroting whatever legal advice he had Googled or heard from his buddy. So the equity is ours. I want my share. Half the equity. That's about $150,000? Maybe $200,000? I stared at him. He was calculating the payout from his betrayal. And then there's your stock options, he went on, gaining momentum. You got those while we were married. Those are community property. And, well, I'm unemployed right now. I quit the dealership to focus on the transition. So I'm going to need spousal support. Alimony. Until I get back on my feet. Alimony, I repeated. You want me to pay you alimony? To support you while you live with my sister and raise your child. He shrugged, trying to look like the victim. It's the law, Val. Disparity of income. You make, what? $200,000 a year now? I have zero income. The court will order it anyway. I'm just trying to do this amicably. You write me a check for the house equity, agree to monthly support for, say, 3 years? And I won't go after your retirement fund. He thought he was being generous. He thought he was cutting me a deal. You're delusional, I said quietly. I'm realistic, he snapped, his nice guy mask slipping. I gave you 4 years of my life, Valerie. I supported you while you climbed the ladder. I cooked dinner. I walked the dog. That counts for something. You were always working. I was the one keeping the home warm. I deserve compensation. Compensation. For being a husband. Is that all? I asked. For now, he said. Brenda and I, we need a house. A proper house for the baby. Your buyout will help us get a down payment. It's the right thing to do, Val. You don't need all this money. You're alone now. That's done. You're alone now. He used my isolation as a weapon. I'm going to find a lawyer, I said, standing up. And we will discuss this through them. Keith rolled his eyes. Don't waste money on lawyers, Val. The law is black and white. 50/50ths. You're just going to drag it out and end up paying my legal fees too. Just write the check. Be the bigger person. There it was again. Be the bigger person. The phrase my parents used to groom me into a doormat. Get out, I said. Fine, he grabbed his suitcases. I'll have my lawyer send over the proposal. Don't say I didn't try to be nice. He slammed the door. I waited until the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. Then, I picked up the document from the coffee table where I had hidden it under a magazine. Keith was right about one thing. The law is black and white. But he was reading the wrong law book. He forgot the book he signed 4 years ago. After Keith left, the adrenaline crashed, leaving me shaking again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was rage. Pure, distilling rage. He wanted half the house? He wanted alimony? He wanted to use my hard-earned money to build a nest for my sister and their baby? I looked at the document in my hands. The prenuptial agreement. I sat back down and opened it to page 4. I needed to memorize this. I needed to be sure. Flashback to April 2019. We were 2 weeks away from the wedding. I had just closed on the apartment, my first real asset. My mentor at work, a sharp woman named Eleanor, had taken me aside. "Valerie," she had said. "You're a rising star. He's a car salesman. I'm not saying don't marry him. I'm saying protect your future." I had felt guilty bringing it up to Keith. We were in love. We were happy. Bringing a contract into it felt unromantic. "Keith," I had said one night over pizza, "my financial advisor suggests we sign a prenup. Just standard stuff. Because of the apartment." Keith had laughed. He actually laughed. He took a bite of pepperoni pizza and waved his hand. "Prenup? Isn't that for, like, billionaires? Or people who plan on getting divorced?" "It's just protection," I explained, feeling small. "For both of us." "Whatever, babe," he had said, wiping grease off his chin. "If it makes you feel better, I'll sign it. I don't care about your money. I care about you. We're gonna be together forever, so it doesn't matter what the paper says, right?" We went to the notary the next day. He didn't even read it. He spent the whole time texting his groomsmen about the bachelor party in Vegas. He signed where the lawyer pointed, joked about signing his life away, and we left. He never asked for a copy. He never mentioned it again. Back to present. I ran my finger over the text. Clause 4.1, Separate Property Regime. The parties agree that the community property regime shall not apply. All property, real or personal, acquired by either party during the marriage shall remain the separate property of the acquiring party. My heart skipped a beat. All property acquired during the marriage. That meant my stock options. My savings. My retirement contributions. I turned the page. Clause 5.2, the marital residence. In the event of divorce, the residence located at address shall remain the sole and separate property of Valery Saunders. Any contributions made by Keith Miller to the maintenance, mortgage, or improvement of said property shall be considered rent and shall not grant him any equitable interest or claim to the property. I let out a gasp. It was explicitly stated. His contributions were rent. He had zero claim to the equity. And finally, the dagger. Clause 8.1, Waiver of spousal support. Both parties knowingly and voluntarily waive any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance, regardless of any future disparity in income or health. He waived it. He waived everything. I sat there, staring at the paper. It wasn't just a legal document, it was a death warrant for his greed. Keith thought he was playing checkmate, but he had forgotten that he resigned from the game 4 years ago. He was banking on the standard Texas laws. He was banking on my guilt. He was banking on my parents pressuring me. He had no idea this document existed, or rather, he was so arrogant and dismissive back then that he had erased it from his memory. I stood up and walked to the window. The view of the Austin skyline was breathtaking. I had worked so hard for this view. And they wanted to take it. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call my mom. I didn't call Keith. I searched for a name I hadn't used in years but kept in my contacts just in case. Meredith Stone, ESQ. Family Law and Asset Protection. She was the lawyer who drafted this agreement. The shark my mentor had recommended. I dialed the number. It was Saturday, but sharks don't sleep. Meredith Stone's office, this is the answering service. This is Valery Saunders. It's an emergency. Tell Meredith her ironclad prenup is about to be tested. And tell her I want to go on the offensive. I hung up. I looked at the empty spot where the TV used to be. Keith wanted a war? He wanted to talk about assets? Fine. We would talk about assets. But we wouldn't do it in a lawyer's office. That was too boring. We wouldn't do it over email. That was too impersonal. No. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see the exact moment the light went out in their eyes. I was going to invite them to dinner. Again. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I was sitting in Meredith Stone's office in downtown Austin. The office smelled of old books and expensive perfume. Meredith walked in, a woman in her 50s with silver haircut in a sharp bob and a suit that cost more than Keith's truck. She sat down, put on her glasses, and looked at the copy of the prenup I had brought. She read it in silence for 5 minutes. Then, she looked up and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "This is beautiful," she said. "I remember drafting this. Your husband, ex-husband-to-be, was the one who kept checking his watch and asking if we had coffee, right?" "That's him," I said. "Well, Valerie," Meredith leaned back. "You have him by the throat. This document holds up." There was no duress. He had legal counsel available, he waived it. He signed it before a notary. It's comprehensive. "He's asking for half the house and alimony," I said. "He says he's unemployed." Meredith laughed. A dry, sharp sound. "He can ask for the moon. He's not getting it. Under this agreement, he leaves the marriage with exactly what he has in his name. Which, judging by your financial disclosure, is debt. He has about $20,000 in credit card debt. And the truck loan," I added. "And you have assets totaling over $500,000, Meredith noted. And he gets zero. Zero equity. Zero alimony. In fact, since you have no children together, this will be a very swift administrative divorce. The only complication is, well, the sister. She's pregnant," I said, the words still tasting like ash. "He wants money to support them." "Not your problem," Meredith said coldly. "Legally speaking, his paternity of another woman's child is irrelevant to your marital assets. However," she tapped her pen on the desk, "he will try to fight this. He'll claim he didn't understand what he was signing. He'll claim you tricked him. It won't work, but it will be annoying." "I don't just want to win, Meredith," I said, leaning forward. "I want to destroy them." Meredith raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "They humiliated me. They announced the pregnancy at my promotion dinner. They have my parents on their side. They are counting on me being nice. I want to crush that hope. I want them to know exactly how screwed they are, and I want to see it happen." Meredith nodded slowly. "Revenge is not a legal strategy, Valerie. But strategic disclosure is." "I want to meet them," I said. "One last time. I want to pretend I'm agreeing to their terms. I want them to believe they won. And then I want to drop this on the table." Meredith thought for a moment. "Dangerous. But if you keep your cool, it could be effective. If you get him to admit on recording that he's unemployed and living with your sister, it helps us prove he's voluntarily underemployed to avoid future obligations. Plus, if he admits he signed the prenup, even if he says he didn't read it, that's an admission of validity." "So I can do it?" "You can. But you have to be an actress. You have to be the defeated wife. Can you do that?" I thought about the tears in the Walmart parking lot. I thought about my mother's betrayal. I thought about the empty space on my wall. "I can do it," I said. "Good," Meredith slid a folder across the desk. "Here is the plan. We draft a petition for divorce based on the prenup. But you don't serve him yet. You meet him. You let him talk. You let him make his demands. And then, you present the reality. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in days. I had a weapon. Now I just needed to set the trap. I took out my phone and dialed Brenda. She answered on the second ring, sounding wary. Hello? Val? Hi, Brenda, I said, forcing my voice to sound tired and broken. Look. I've been thinking about what Mom said. About the baby. Oh. Her voice perked up instantly. Yeah. I don't want to fight. I'm tired. I just want this over with. Tell Keith I want to meet. Saturday night. The Capitol Grill again. Let's close this chapter peacefully. Really? Brenda sounded ecstatic. Oh, Val. I knew you'd come around. I knew you were reasonable. I'll tell him. He'll be so happy. I'm sure he will be, I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. I hung up. The trap was set. The week leading up to Saturday was a masterclass in deception. If there was an Oscar for scorned wife pretending to be a doormat, I would have swept the award season. I had to be careful. Keith and Brenda were greedy, but they weren't entirely stupid. They needed to believe that I was broken. They needed to believe that my mother's guilt trip had worked and that I was desperate to keep the peace for the sake of the family image. I stopped posting on social media. I let my calls go to voicemail and only texted back with short, resigned answers. Okay. I understand. Let's just talk on Saturday. On Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a notification from American Express. I had forgotten to remove Keith as an authorized user on one of my secondary cards. Transaction approved for $1,200. Rolex Jewelers, the domain, Austin. I stared at the screen. My blood boiled so hot I thought the veins in my neck would burst. He was unemployed. He was living on his pregnant mistress's couch. And he was buying a Rolex. With my credit card. My finger hovered over the report fraud button. I wanted to freeze the card. I wanted to call the cops. But then, I stopped. If I cut him off now, he'd know I was fighting back. He'd lawyer up for real. He'd refuse to come to dinner. No. Let him buy the watch. Let him wear it. It would make the fall that much harder. The debt would be in his name eventually, the prenup covered debt separation clearly. He was just digging his own grave, diamond-encrusted shovel in hand. I called Brenda on Thursday evening. I made sure to sound exhausted. Hey, Brenda, I said, pitching my voice low. Hi, Val. She sounded chirpy. Too happy. Keith told me about the dinner. We are so relieved. Honestly, Mom hasn't stopped crying tears of joy. Yeah, well, I sighed heavily. I can't do the fighting anymore. The lawyers, the screaming, it's too much. I just want to give you guys what you need so I can move on. That is so mature of you, Val, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Really? And don't worry, we don't want to take everything. Just enough to be secure. For the baby. Right. The baby, I said. Bring a list, okay? Write down everything you guys think is fair. I want to look at the numbers together. We already have a list, she giggled. Keith made a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet. The man couldn't balance a checkbook to save his life, but for my money, he made a spreadsheet. Great, I said. See you Saturday. Saturday arrived. I spent the afternoon preparing. I didn't dress like a victim. I dressed like a CEO attending a hostile board meeting. I wore a black sheath dress, sleek, expensive, and intimidating. I pulled my hair back into a tight chignon. Minimal makeup, just a bold red lip. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the crying girl in the Walmart parking lot. She was a predator lying in wait. I grabbed the manila envelope containing the prenup. I also grabbed a second folder, my own calculations on the cost of raising a child in Texas on minimum wage. I arrived at the Capitol Grill at 7:45 p.m. I asked for the exact same table we had sat at 3 weeks ago. The hostess looked at me with recognition, probably remembering my storm out. "Just me for now," I said, slipping her a 20. "My guests will be joining shortly. And please, keep the wine coming." I sat down. The restaurant was bustling. The smell of truffle oil and seared steak filled the air. It was the smell of success. Tonight, it would smell like justice. At 8 p.m. sharp, they walked in. I almost laughed out loud. Keith was wearing the new Rolex. It was flashy, gold, and completely tacky. He had paired it with a suit that I knew I had bought for him 2 years ago. Brenda was wearing a white dress that emphasized her small baby bump. She was glowing with the smug satisfaction of a woman who thinks she pulled off the heist of the century. They walked in holding hands, parading their love through the dining room. They slid into the booth opposite me. "Valerie," Keith nodded, trying to look solemn but failing to hide the excitement in his eyes. "You look good." "Hi, Val," Brenda smiled. "Thank you for doing this." "Really?" "Let's order," I said, ignoring the pleasantries. "I'm not staying long." We ordered. They ordered the most expensive items on the menu: lobster mac and cheese, the tomahawk ribeye, a bottle of Camus. They were treating this like a victory lap. They thought I was paying. "So," Keith said, leaning back and flashing the Rolex. "About the settlement." I brought the list. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He smoothed it out on the table. "Like I said, we want to be fair," Keith began, his voice taking on a pseudo-professional tone. "We're willing to waive claim to your 401k if you agree to the immediate buyout of the apartment equity and a lump sum alimony payment of, let's say, $50,000? Plus the monthly support for 3 years. Brenda chimed in, "And we were thinking, since you're keeping the furniture, maybe you could help us with a nursery allowance? Cribs are so expensive these days." I watched them. I watched their mouths move. I watched them eat my bread and drink the wine I was going to make them pay for. They were dissecting my life, carving up my hard work like vultures picking at a carcass. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Well," Keith scratched his chin. "The truck. It's in your name for the insurance discount. I need you to transfer the title to me. And pay off the remaining balance. As a gesture of goodwill." I nodded slowly. A gesture of goodwill. Interesting choice of words. I reached into my bag. "I have something for you too," I said. Keith's eyes lit up. He probably thought it was a check. Or the signed divorce papers agreeing to his terms. I pulled out the yellow envelope. It looked old. The edges were slightly bent. "Before we discuss the nursery allowance," I said, placing the envelope on the table, "we need to review some existing paperwork." Keith frowned. "What is that?" "Open it," I said. The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. The air conditioning seemed to drop 10 degrees. Keith looked at the envelope like it was a bomb. Brenda stopped chewing her lobster. "What is this, Val?" Brenda asked, her voice losing its sugary coating. "I thought you brought the check." "Just open it, Keith," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had an edge of steel that made him flinch. Keith reached out with his hand, the one weighing heavy with the stolen Rolex, and picked up the envelope. He tore the seal. He pulled out the document with the blue legal backing. He stared at the cover page. Prenuptial agreement. He blinked. He looked up at me, then back at the paper. A nervous chuckle escaped his lips. What is this? Is this a joke? Do I look like I'm laughing? I asked, staring dead into his eyes. That is the contract you signed on May 12, 2019. The one you called rich people nonsense. The one you signed so you could get to your bachelor party faster. Keith's face went pale. The color drained out of him so fast he looked like a wax figure. He flipped the page, his hands starting to shake. But we're married, Brenda stammered, looking between us. That doesn't matter. Texas is a community property state. Keith told me. His friend told him. Keith's friend is an idiot, I said. And Keith is a liar. I didn't read this. Keith blurted out, his voice rising an octave. You tricked me. I didn't know what I was signing. You were sitting in a lawyer's office, Keith. There was a notary. You were offered your own counsel and you declined. Clause 12, I pointed at the paper without looking. Voluntary execution. You signed stating you were of sound mind and fully understood the terms. This can't be real, Keith whispered. He was frantically scanning the pages now. Read clause 4, I said. Read it out loud. He didn't. He couldn't. He just stared at the words. So I recited it for him. I had memorized it. Complete separation of assets. Everything I bought during the marriage is mine. The apartment? Mine. The stocks? Mine. The savings? Mine. You have no claim to the equity. Not a single cent. No. Brenda whispered. She grabbed the document from Keith's hands, almost ripping it. She wasn't looking for legal terms, she was looking for a loophole. But the house. We need a house. We have a baby. And then there's clause 8, I continued, leaning forward. Waiver of spousal support. No alimony. No maintenance. Regardless of income disparity. I picked up my wineglass and took a slow sip, savoring the terror in their eyes. So, let's recap, I said. You want half my house? No. You want alimony? No. You want me to pay off your truck? No. Actually, the truck is in my name, so I'll be taking that back tonight. You can Uber home. Valerie, you can't do this. Keith slammed his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. People at nearby tables turned to look. I gave you 4 years. I have nothing. I quit my job. You quit your job because you thought you hit the jackpot, I corrected him. You thought you could divorce me and live off my settlement. You gambled, Keith. And you lost. I reached for the envelope again, tapping it with my fingernail. Before we continue to the next part of your destruction, I said, looking straight at the camera of my life, I want to ask you something. If you are cheering right now, if you are feeling that sweet sense of justice washing over you, please stop what you are doing and comment the number 1 below. Hit that like button. Let me know you're sitting at this table with me, watching these 2 greedy traitors realize their lives are over. Comment 1 and let's finish them off. Keith looked like he was going to vomit. Brenda was crying, but not the cute, manipulative tears she used on our mother. These were ugly, terrified tears. Val, please, Brenda sobbed. We made a mistake. Okay? We messed up. But don't destroy us. We have nothing. How are we supposed to live? You have love, right? I mocked them, throwing their own words back. Isn't that what you said 3 weeks ago? Love is love. It just happened. Well, now you can live on love. Because you certainly won't be living on my money. I'll sue you, Keith hissed, trying to regain some dominance. I'll find a lawyer who can tear this flimsy piece of paper apart. I'll drag you through court for years. Go ahead, I shrugged. My lawyer, Meredith Stone, is one of the best in the state. She drafted this. She's waiting for your call. But Keith, lawyers cost money. Retainers start at $5,000. Do you have $5,000? He went silent. He didn't even have $500. I didn't think so, I said. And by the way, that Rolex? The transaction is pending. I'm reporting it as unauthorized use of a credit card tomorrow morning. You might want to return it before the police get involved. He instinctively covered the watch with his other hand. Now, I said, pulling out the second folder. Let's talk about your future. Because while you were planning how to spend my money, I was doing some math for you. I opened the second folder. It was a simple spreadsheet, far more accurate than whatever fantasy numbers Keith had scribbled down. Since you like spreadsheets, Keith, I made one for you. I slid the paper across the table. It was a breakdown of the cost of living versus their projected income. Let's look at the numbers, I began, using my boardroom presentation voice. Keith, your average income at the dealership was $5,000 a month gross. But you quit. Let's assume you get a similar job, which will be hard, considering I know the owner of your old dealership and he knows why you left. But let's be generous. I pointed to the first column. $5,000 gross. After taxes, that's about $3,800. Now, here is the fun part. Child support. Brenda looked up, her eyes red and puffy. Child support? But we're together. For now, I said. But in the eyes of the law, Keith is the father and he has an obligation. Even if you stay together, that money is legally earmarked for the child, not for your rent or your hair extensions. But let's be real, statistically, relationships born from affairs end within 2 years. So, when you inevitably break up, Keith will owe 20% of his net income for one child in Texas. I tapped the figure. $760 a month. Automatically deducted from his paycheck. Keith stared at the number. So now Keith is taking home $3,040. Rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe area of Austin is at least $1,800. Utilities, $200. Car insurance, since you'll be buying your own car now, $150. Gas, $200. Phone, $100. I did the mental math for them. That leaves you with roughly $590 a month for food, diapers, clothes, and medical bills. And Keith, you have $20,000 in credit card debt. Minimum payments are what? $600? I paused for effect. You are in the red, Keith. You are technically insolvent. Every single month, you will be losing money. I turned to Brenda. And you, B. Freelance graphic design. You made, what, $12,000 last year? That barely covers groceries. And with a newborn? Daycare costs $1,200 a month. So you can't work full-time unless you find free childcare. Mom and Dad will help us, Brenda shot back, her voice trembling. They won't let us starve. Mom and Dad are retired on a fixed income, I reminded her. Dad's pension isn't a bottomless pit. If you move in with them, you'll be 3 adults and a screaming baby in a 3-bedroom house. You think that's going to work? You think Keith, who likes his throne and his OLED TV, is going to enjoy sleeping in your childhood twin bed? I looked at Keith. He looked like he was shrinking physically. The arrogance was gone. The man of the house act had crumbled into dust. He looked at Brenda, and for the first time, I saw it in his eyes, resentment. He was looking at her not as his lover, but as the anchor that was dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He had left a woman with a penthouse and $1 million net worth for a woman who was going to force him to live in his in-laws' spare room. "You did this," Keith muttered, looking at me. "You set us up." "I didn't make you sleep with my sister, Keith. I didn't make you sign the prenup without reading it. I didn't make you quit your job. You did all of that. I just kept the receipts." I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. "I'm filing the divorce petition on Monday. It will be uncontested, because you have no money to contest it. You will sign the papers, Keith. If you don't, I will sue you for the $100,000 of marital funds you wasted on lifestyle expenses over the last 4 years. I have the bank statements. I will make sure you spend the next 10 years paying me back every cent." Keith didn't move. He couldn't. "Oh, and the bill?" I pointed to the waiter who was hovering nearby. "It's on you. Enjoy the tomahawk ribeye. It's the last expensive meal you'll eat for a decade." I grabbed my purse. I didn't look back at the mirror this time. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I would see, 2 people realizing that the grass wasn't greener on the other side. It was scorched earth. I walked out into the cool night air. I pulled out my phone and deleted Keith's contact. Then Brenda's. It was over. The war was won. But the cleanup operation was just beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional fortitude. I filed for divorce on Monday morning, citing insupportability and attaching the prenuptial agreement as Exhibit A. Keith tried to fight back, just like Meredith predicted. He found some strip mall lawyer who tried to send a threatening letter claiming fraud in the inducement, arguing that I had somehow tricked Keith into signing the prenup by promising to take care of him. Meredith responded with a 3-page letter that was essentially a legal sledgehammer. She attached the transcripts of the notary session, which she had wisely kept, the waiver of counsel Keith had signed, and a timeline of his unemployment. She ended the letter with a simple threat: "If you pursue this frivolous claim, we will seek full legal fees and sanctions against your client." Keith's lawyer dropped him 2 days later. Keith didn't have the retainer to hire a new one. He signed the divorce papers. But while the legal battle was swift, the family battle was ugly. My parents didn't just take Brenda's side, they declared war on me. They viewed my enforcement of the prenup not as justice, but as cruelty. On a Tuesday afternoon, my assistant, Simone, buzzed my intercom. "Valerie, there are 2 people in the lobby demanding to see you." "Frank and Joyce Saunders?" "They say they're your parents." My stomach dropped. They had come to my workplace. They were crossing the professional boundary. "Tell them I'm in a meeting," I said. "They're shouting, Valerie," Simone whispered. "Your dad is yelling about how you're abandoning your family." I closed my eyes. I couldn't let them make a scene here. I was the commercial director. I had a reputation. "I'm coming down." I walked into the lobby. My parents were standing by the security desk. My mother looked disheveled, her eyes red. My father looked furious. People were staring. "How could you?" my mother screamed the moment she saw me. "You left them with nothing. Keith called us crying. He has to return his truck. They have no car." "Lower your voice," I hissed, walking over to them. "This is my place of business." "You don't care about business," my dad shouted, pointing a finger in my face. "You care about money. You're cold, Valerie. Ice cold. Your sister is pregnant. She needs that money. You have plenty." "It's my money, Dad," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I earned it. They betrayed me. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Family forgives, he yelled. Family shares. You are letting your ego destroy your sister's life. Her actions destroyed her life, I said firmly. I am just refusing to pay for the wreckage. If you don't help them, my mother said, stepping forward, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper, if you don't write them a check today, you are no daughter of ours. We will cut you off. You won't be welcome at Christmas. You won't see the baby. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't just mad because I was being mean, they were mad because they were going to have to foot the bill. They realized that if I didn't pay for Brenda's mistakes, they would have to. They were trying to bully me into saving their retirement fund. You're not cutting me off, I said, standing tall. I'm cutting you off. Security? The guard stepped forward. Please escort these people out. They are harassing me. My mother gasped. My father looked like I had slapped him. You'll regret this, Valery, my dad shouted as the guard gently guided them toward the revolving doors. You'll die alone with your money. I watched them leave. I felt a piece of my soul crack, but it didn't break. I turned around and saw a few colleagues watching. I held my head high. Sorry about the disturbance, I said calmly. Family drama. Back to work. I went back to my office, closed the door, and allowed myself to cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then, I wiped my face, reapplied my lipstick, and went back to work. They were right about one thing, I would be alone. But I would rather be alone in a penthouse than surrounded by leeches in a pit. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized in July. I was officially a single woman. I didn't speak to my family, but in the age of social media and small towns, news travels. I had a cousin, Sarah, who was the black sheep of the family because she refused to go to church. She became my spy. Sarah called me one night in October. Val, you have no idea, she whispered, like she was sharing state secrets. It's a disaster over there. Tell me, I said, sipping a glass of Chardonnay on my new balcony. So, Keith and Brenda moved in with your parents in San Antonio. But the house is too small. Keith is sleeping on the pull-out couch in the den because Brenda needs the bed for her back. Dad hates it because Keith stays up late watching TV. Does he have a job? He got a job at a used car lot. Like, a buy here pay here place on the highway. He makes minimum wage plus commission, but he's not selling anything. He's miserable. He looks 10 years older, Val. He's gained like 30 pounds. And Brenda? She had the baby last week. A girl. Kayla. Kayla. My niece. I felt a twinge of sadness, but I pushed it down. Is she okay? Physically? Yes. But mentally? She's losing it. The baby has colic. Screams all night. Brenda is exhausted. And since they have no money for a nanny or daycare, she's stuck in the house 24/7. And get this, Keith and Brenda fight constantly. The neighbors called the cops once because they were screaming so loud. What were they fighting about? Money. Obviously. Keith blames Brenda for seducing him and ruining his easy life with you. Brenda blames Keith for being a loser who can't provide. She actually told Mom, I thought he had money. Can you believe that? I laughed. It was a dark, bitter laugh. She thought he had money because I made him look rich, I said. I bought the clothes. I bought the truck. She fell in love with my wallet, but she thought it was his personality. Exactly, Sarah said. And Mom and Dad are stressed. Their electric bill has tripled. They're buying all the diapers. Dad is talking about coming out of retirement to work at Home Depot because they can't afford 3 adults and a baby. That's their choice, I said. They chose to enable them. I know. I wanted you to know. You won, Val. You really won. They are miserable. I didn't win, Sarah, I said softly. I just survived. But thank you for telling me. I hung up. I looked out at the city lights. I tried to imagine Keith in a cheap suit, trying to sell a 2010 Honda Civic with high mileage, sweating in the Texas heat, knowing that every paycheck would be garnished for child support. I tried to imagine Brenda, trapped in her childhood bedroom, covered in spit up, realizing that her fairy tale romance was actually a horror story of poverty and resentment. They wanted to play house. Now they were dealing with the reality of a crumbling foundation. Meanwhile, my life was taking a different turn. A year had passed since the dinner. I sold the apartment. I couldn't live there anymore, the ghosts of Keith were too loud. I sold it for a massive profit, the market had spiked, and used the money to buy a penthouse in downtown Austin. It was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a wraparound terrace, a chef's kitchen. It was a space that was entirely mine. No compromise. No man cave. No ugly recliner. I hired a decorator. I wanted to look like power, I told him. And peace. My career skyrocketed. With the distraction of a deadbeat husband gone, I focused entirely on my work. I closed the biggest deal in the company's history. My bonus that year was more than Keith used to make in 5 years. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was internal. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Evans. "Why do you think you stayed with him so long?" she asked me one session. "Because I thought I had to buy love," I admitted, crying for the first time in months. I thought if I paid for everything, if I solved every problem, he wouldn't leave me. I was trying to be valuable so I wouldn't be abandoned. "And he abandoned you anyway," Dr. Evans said gently. "Yes. But now I know that my value isn't in my wallet. It's in me." I started traveling. I went to Paris alone. I walked along the Seine, ate croissants, and didn't have to worry about anyone complaining that their feet hurt or that the menu was too expensive. I went to a cooking class in Italy. I learned to make pasta from scratch. I was lonely sometimes, yes. Sunday mornings were quiet. But I realized that the loneliness of being single was far better than the loneliness of being married to someone who didn't see you. I started dating again, tentatively. I met a man named Daniel at an art gallery. He was an architect. Successful. Own firm. On our first date, the check came. I instinctively reached for my purse. Daniel gently stopped my hand. "I got this, Valerie." "I can pay my share," I said, defensive. "I know you can," he smiled. "But I asked you out. And I want to treat you." It was such a small gesture, but it made me want to cry. I wasn't the ATM anymore. I was a partner. We took it slow. I told him about my past. He didn't judge. He was appalled on my behalf. "They sound like vampires," he said. They were, I agreed. But I drove a stake through their hearts. Life was good. I was healthy. I was wealthy. I was loved properly. But the vampires weren't done yet. They had one last attempt to suck me dry. It was a Tuesday in November. I was in a board meeting when my personal phone buzzed. I saw the number. It was my father. I hadn't spoken to him in 18 months. I debated ignoring it. But curiosity, and maybe a lingering sense of duty, made me answer. I stepped out of the meeting. "This better be good." "Valerie?" His voice sounded old. Frail. "Valerie, please don't hang up." What do you want, Dad? It's bad, Val. Keith left. I paused. Left? Like, to the store? No. He left Brenda. He packed his bags in the middle of the night and took off. He left a note saying he couldn't take the screaming baby and the nagging anymore. He moved to Houston. He says he's not coming back. I felt a surge of validation so strong it almost knocked me over. I knew it. I knew he wouldn't last. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She's broken, Val. She's hysterical. She has no money. Keith isn't answering his phone, so we don't know if he'll send child support. And, well, your mother and I are drowning. The medical bills for the baby. Kayla has asthma. The inhalers are expensive. He started crying. My father, the proud man who used to lecture me about sharing, was sobbing on the phone. We can't do this, Val. We're going to lose the house. We're behind on the mortgage. Please. I'm begging you. Just help us. Not for Keith. Not even for Brenda. For us. For your parents. And for the baby. I leaned against the glass wall of the conference room, looking out at the city. I felt a pang of pity. Not for Brenda, she made her bed. But for my parents, who were old and foolish, and for an innocent child who was born into a mess. But I also remembered the lobby. I remembered them screaming at me. Dad, I said slowly. I will not give Brenda cash. I will not give you cash. Because I know you'll just give it to her, and she'll waste it. Then what? Send me the electric bill. Send me the mortgage statement. Send me the pharmacy bill for the baby. I will pay the providers directly. I will make sure you have a roof and lights and medicine. But that is it. No grocery money. No clothes. No spending cash. And Brenda needs to get a job. A real job. Waitress, retail, I don't care. She needs to work. She can't, the baby. The baby can go to daycare if Brenda works. There are state programs. Figure it out. That is my offer. Take it or leave it. Thank you, he wept. Thank you, Valerie. You're a saint. I'm not a saint, Dad, I said. I'm just the only adult in this family. I hung up. I paid the bills for 6 months. I made sure my niece had medicine. I made sure my parents didn't become homeless. But I never visited. I never let them back into my heart. Keith eventually got arrested in Houston for unpaid child support. I saw his mugshot online. He looked haggard, balding, and defeated. Brenda moved into a small apartment subsidized by the state and started working at a call center. They were surviving. But they weren't living. Not really. Tonight, I'm sitting on my terrace. Daniel is inside making dinner. I can smell garlic and rosemary. I have a glass of vintage Cabernet in my hand, the same wine I drank the night my life fell apart, but it tastes different now. It tastes like victory. I look back at that night at the Capitol Grill, and I realize something strange. Keith and Brenda didn't ruin my life. They saved it. If they hadn't betrayed me, I would still be married to a leech. I would still be dimming my light to make him feel secure. I would still be the doormat for my family. I would have wasted my prime years supporting people who secretly hated me for my success. Their betrayal was the catalyst I needed to burn down the dead wood in my forests so new trees could grow. It forced me to find my spine. It forced me to understand the value of a contract, both legal and emotional. It taught me that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by loyalty and respect. My family now is Daniel. My family is Simone, my assistant who stood by me. My family is Sarah, my cousin. My family is me. To anyone listening who is going through this, who feels the knife in their back, who feels the world crumbling, listen to me. Do not just cry. Do not just accept it. Check your paperwork. Check your bank accounts. Dry your tears and sharpen your claws. Because the best revenge isn't screaming. It isn't slashing tires. The best revenge is living a life so full, so rich, and so happy that their existence becomes irrelevant to you. The best revenge is letting them watch you rise while they sink under the weight of their own poor choices. I take a sip of wine. Daniel calls my name from the kitchen. Coming, I say. I put the glass down. I smile at the city. I am Valery Saunders. I was betrayed. I was humiliated. I was abandoned. And I have never been better. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but I hope it gives you strength. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please like this video and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, we have so many more stories to tell. I'm signing off now to enjoy my dinner. Goodbye, and stay strong. Valery's story reminds us that sometimes our greatest transformations emerge from our deepest wounds. While betrayal shattered the life she thought she had built, it simultaneously revealed the foundation of strength she never knew existed within herself. This narrative isn't simply about revenge, it's about reclaiming one's dignity and understanding that true value comes not from what we give to others, but from what we demand for ourselves. In a world that often teaches us to sacrifice our needs for the sake of family or love, Valery's journey illustrates the critical importance of establishing boundaries. She discovered that generosity without limits becomes exploitation, and that sometimes walking away isn't an act of cruelty, but of necessary self-preservation. The prenuptial agreement wasn't just a legal document, it was a symbol of her inherent worth, a declaration that she deserved protection even when she couldn't foresee needing it. Perhaps the most powerful lesson here is that our greatest victories aren't measured by how we punish those who hurt us, but by how we rebuild ourselves afterward. Valery found authentic connection, reclaimed her professional power, and created a life defined by genuine value rather than obligation. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? What boundaries have you established to protect your worth? Comment good if this reflection resonated with you and reminded you of your own inherent value that should never be compromised.